Hi everyone, it's Mandy here and welcome to Psychology at Sea. And today I'm super stoked to introduce you to one of my new friends and colleagues and someone that I've been doing some amazing work with, and we're going to continue to work together with Kate and Mel to bring you some incredible courses on psychology, psychological first aid and psychological safety at sea. So this is Kate Diggle, and she is a clinical psychotherapist based in Canberra, Australia. And Kate, how about you introduce yourself to everyone watching?
Thanks, Amanda. So I'm Kate. I'm a psychotherapist. I've been doing this for probably about 15 years and work with organisations and families and individuals. I've got 3 kids and a stepchild and 2 dogs and a cat. I had a variety of many varied different jobs before I pretty much sort of fell into my own heap in my late 20s. It's a bit of a mess. Got myself into therapy, and a few years into that sort of journey, sort of thought, oh, I wonder if I'm not too mad to do this sort of thing myself. And, plucked up the courage to talk about it with my therapist, and I've done lots of training and really enjoy the work that I do, thankfully, having explored many different career options that weren't the right ones for me. I personally don't know how anyone does life without therapy or some kind of coaching or some kind of additional support, so it feels good to do this work, good to have found this work.
I'd like to come back to that in just a moment, because you've touched on something really important there that'd be a great place to kick off this interview. But just before we do, who are the groups and the people that you work with? Are they teams? Are they high-performing teams? Are they sports people? Are they everybody? Are they families? Who are some of the people you generally work with?
Yeah, sure. So, being based in Canberra, I work with a lot of government organisations and leadership teams in that space. I work with the Canberra Raiders, the rugby league team here, a lot of lawyers. And then in my private practice, outside of the workplace stuff, I really work with a wide range of individuals, a lot of men. And a lot of, I'd say, people often say, what kind of clients do you work with? And I seem to work with a lot of people who have a pretty hectic childhood background and have really made it in the world despite their background. And I guess, coming to therapy to sort of really make life a bit easier and to break patterns.
And what you
walks of life.
What you said before about that, from what I heard, you hit a crisis point before you went and got therapy, and now what you've realized is that you kind of could find it hard to understand how people could have a life without having therapy. And I think this is one of the reasons I really wanted to put our team together and get you guys involved in this program. Is when I was looking at the mental health issues we have in yachting, some of the things that came to me is that compared to, say, working in hospitals, where seeking counselling every time there's a major emergency is a really wise thing to do, and you're nearly forced or highly encouraged by the hospital system to seek therapy from a prevention rather than cure model, so after that CPR and horrible resuscitation of a child, you then, get sessions with a psychologist or a counsellor, and you work through it rather than it building up, and then you falling apart. And I definitely think, whether it's because we're very transient or in some ways I see yachting can be a bit backward, where people could still be labelled. First thing, if there's a psychologist involved, well, what's wrong with you? Well, nothing actually. I'm just a human being on earth, and I've, had some family troubles. I've seen some car accidents. We've had a couple of accidents at sea. I just want to be the best person I can and a high performing leader, and that's why I'm doing it. And this is why I came up with this model when I started talking to you guys. Is I started thinking, how do we prevent psychological illness and mental health problems on board our yacht through our leadership? What if we could take the steps to become better leaders, and if there is a major incident, we know that we've done everything we can to prevent mental health issues coming from that incident. Of course, people are going to come to sea and to our boats with a whole range of, from a whole range of walks of life and all sorts of backgrounds. So yeah, I really want to, talk to that a little bit, because I think it would be really good for everyone out there that's listening that might be curious to understand that it's something to be really proud of, is whenever something arises, to have someone you get to talk to. And from my own experience, I decided to do it. So I'd stop telling my friends about nursing stories when I was drunk, when I was in my 20s. I was like, what if I go and just pay someone to give all that to empty my trash? And then I can just enjoy my friends. So yeah, how did you come to believe in that, and would you like to talk into that a little bit?
I think absolutely agree with you about, I hear it's maybe stronger in yachting, but I think even though we talk openly about mental health, and people acknowledge that it's part of being human, that we struggle sometimes, often the biggest barrier and the biggest judge and the biggest critic to getting help, the biggest source of stigmatism sort of comes from within. It's all very well and it's like, oh, you should go and speak to someone, but when it comes to ourselves, often there's this belief that, oh, well, I shouldn't need this, or that sort of often, I think it's Brene Brown's got a quote that vulnerability is the first thing that we look for in others and the last thing we look for in ourselves.
Yeah.
It sort of still feels a bit irksome if we are reaching out for support. And I think if leaders have such a valuable role in all of this, to be able to model and normalize and validate and encourage, that, oh, well, something's going on. Well, you need someone impartial outside of this situation so that you can process it, so that you can then come back and be your best self, put your be able to put your best foot forward. But you can't do that when you're sort of holding stuff or pushing it down, trying to pretend it's not there, or all of the things that we do. And I certainly did for many years before it all sort of fell apart a bit, that actually that it's almost like going to the gym regularly, it's sort of just having that debrief, that download, that space to process and get fresh eyes on a situation, go, oh yeah, that is why it's having such a big impact. It's not actually about this thing, it's about that thing. And oh, okay, to sort of reorganize our feelings, our thoughts. Yeah. I can't bang on enough about why everybody should need it. But, and totally to your point, I remember the first time I went to counselling, literally hiding on the way in there, terrified that I might see me going in,
Yep.
And I remember talking to a workplace actually, and they said something. It was like an HR person who obviously didn't really understand this space very well, and sort of said, oh, well, we've obviously got a lot of troubled people because they've been accessing the service or whatever. And I was like, oh, no, I'd say you'll find that they're your proactive, self-responsible people who are taking advantage of, of the additional coaching and support that's available to them to better themselves. So that's a bit of a stigma that needs to be redressed, I guess.
Absolutely. You just brought back some hilarious memories. I think I nearly wore a disguise to my first counselling appointment. I was like ducking up the stairs and hoping no one would be in the waiting room. And I think there'll be a few people smirking, having the same recollection right now. So Kate, you touched on something that really jumped out at me then about the inner critic. And I believe from coaching, counseling and training thousands of yacht crew, many hundreds of owners over the years, that I feel that one of the things that are really wearing people down is the critic, you know, and one of our jobs in the industry is to make the boat look perfect, like it never breaks down. And then behind the scenes, everything's breaking, and you put your life and soul and sacrifice your family time and give up weddings and funerals and Easter and Christmas and all of the above to get the boat ready and make it perfect. And then sometimes, you know, the feedback can be quite negative and quite critical. And from so many people, that's often the straw that breaks the camel's back. And it can often filter down, you know, is the criticisms and how people deal with the criticisms and take it on, and how let that affect them. So how would you could you speak about this a little bit to us and give us some tricks and some information behind why criticism has such a big effect on us when we're generally very resilient people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the work of the inner critic and all those sort of parts of ourselves that have a tendency to speak to us in a way that we wouldn't tend to speak to other people in, or, you know, not when we're being our best selves anyway, I think is the source of so much of our distress as human beings. And it's important to understand some of the sort of function of the critical voices that we might have in our head, you know, that they're not an evil part of ourselves. They're a part of ourselves, usually trying to protect us, to keep us safe, or trying to motivate us. You know, that the underlying intent is usually not to harm, but what happens is that we create harm in ourselves, you know. So say we're on the receiving end of somebody else's criticism, that already puts our body in a stress state. We're already heightened. When we're heightened, our inner critic gets louder. And so at a time when we need soothing and reassuring and you know, going, it's okay, everyone makes mistakes, we can get through this, let's move on, for example, we're likely to go, oh my God, I'm such an idiot, I can't believe I did that, you know. And so our stress levels remain at this heightened state. And we know when we're in that sort of state, we're not feeling good, we're not able to do our best work, we're not feeling cooperative, or you know, feeling accepted by the people that we're in such close confinement with, you know. And so getting into the habit of trying, and it's a practice and it's a work in progress, but it is, in my opinion, one of the most helpful little interventions that we can do, is that when we notice ourselves feeling stressed, feeling like, oh, I've disappointed, you know, I've just had to tell my family I'm not going to be home again, or, you know, I've made a mistake that's actually created, you know, a significant amount of problem for people, or whatever. It's not soft. It's not letting ourselves off the hook. It's not, you know, it's not wallowing in our own self-pity. It is simply a very strategic and resilient move to actively turn to ourself, you know, often applying physical touch. It's exactly, if we see somebody else in distress, we are almost, you know, it's almost innate for us to sort of, if we know them well, put our hand on their back, you know, sort of give them a bit of reassurance, maybe, you know, speak to them in a soothing way. It's okay, you know, don't worry, like things are going to be okay, or whatever. And really, it's what we need in those moments is that from ourselves, because then if we put our hand, like try it just now, just pop your hand on your chest, you know, take a deep breath. Just feel the warmth, the support of your hand on your chest. Give yourself a little smile. And if we're just, if we're responding to how we're feeling, for example, there's a part of me just concerned that, am I rabbiting on a bit too much, or is this relevant, or whatever, just providing yourself with that little bit of reassurance, it's okay. It's okay. You're doing fine. You're only human, like whatever it might be. But that just brings that bit of relief that essentially gets us out of that sort of stressed state and into a state where I can stop rabbiting on and I can speak in a very calm therapist's voice and give meaningful content. But, that sort of really, it calms us in the moment so that we're able to engage and we're actually able to hear the feedback, because feedback's a gift, whether it's criticism or not. But it also, very importantly, is training our brain to learn to respond to ourselves with kindness in the face of difficulty. There's no logical reason why that would not be a good idea, but there is a huge amount of resistance that comes up in the human psyche to doing that, But all the evidence suggests now there's significant body of research supporting, this field called mindful self-compassion. And not only does it have obvious impacts on our own physical and mental, emotional well-being, it has massive impact in the quality of our relationships, really important when you're working together in a confined space for a long period of time. But it also has been found to be the most sustainable form of motivation to succeed in wherever we want, whatever we want to do in life. And that's because part of the road to success in any field, involves making mistakes. It involves sort of, being able to ride those waves. If we're uber perfectionistic, it becomes very, very difficult to grow and to develop. The research on the motivation stuff was so compelling for the International Olympic Federation of Coaches that anyone who that world of high performance athletes is very harsh coaching style, been adopted as part of their official coaching style to incorporate this self-compassion as a way for athletes to perform better, more sustainably at high levels. So,
wow, that's incredible. And as you speak, I find, in the back of my mind is bringing up some questions that I can already feel the resistance to this and see how important it is. But from what I'm hearing, you're saying that we could possibly sustain employment or continue to work in a somewhat critical environment if we were able to practice more self-compassion, which is fascinating, because I know when I've been in those roles, for example, working for a very critical boss, the natural way to deal with that is to work harder, to exercise more, and to nearly punish your body, and to try and find some space and time for self-compassion feels nearly too luxurious and something that you'll put off till you're on holiday in Bali, lying by a pool in a perfect world that, let's be honest, is probably not going to happen. Or if it does, you'll probably be busy with your family. So yeah, like how do you become disciplined, and how much time would it take each day to actually make these minor adjustments?
Well, I mean, you can be as much or as little time as you want. I think the first step is just noticing when you're not doing it. It's starting to really and pay attention and go, far out. It wasn't a very nice way of saying that, like, would I say that to someone else? Or, just noticing when that critic appears. But then if you try and just, there's lots of sort of things you'll read on social media going, silence the critic, banish the critic, like that's a part of you. That's a part of you, just like all the other parts. And that part of you is usually scared. And it's terrified of being extinguished, because as far as that part of you is concerned, it's working overdrive to protect you, to keep you motivated, to keep you safe. So the part
So just
that I
as
meant,
an example, like part of the fight or flight response, it's there saying, I'm there to stop you being eaten by a tiger.
yeah. That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. Or the part that I mentioned before, saying to me, Kate, what are you waffling on about? Is this even relevant? Is working hard to try and make sure that I don't get rejected. That what I'm sort of offering is received. So we sort of have to befriend our critical parts. So the first step is getting to know them. So what are they saying? What are they? And then acknowledging them. It can make you feel a bit crazy when you're talking to yourself, but we're at it all the time anyway. You're just putting a bit of consciousness to it, and sort of, I hear you. I hear that you're scared. And that's okay. And let's think of a kinder way to say that, for example. You can do that through writing exercises. You can do it in, just thinking in your head. For me, the most helpful, do you want a little tool?
Yes, absolutely. If you're willing to share, we'd love that.
Well, this is, I didn't make it up. So this is, there's a woman called Dr. Kristen Neff who's done a lot of research in this space, and her tool called the self-compassion break, for me, has been one of the most helpful tools. So the way it works, it's a 3-part phrase, right? And the 3 parts of the phrase combine the 3 elements of self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So the first element is mindfulness. So that is bringing to mind an acknowledgement of what is. So when you're feeling some difficult emotion, a difficult situation or whatever, rather than minimizing it, shoving it down, having another drink, busying yourself, exercising like a maniac, whatever, all the things that we do to avoid our feelings, so rather than minimizing it or maximizing it, oh my God, this happened, I can't believe it, and trying to recruit everyone into the drama and all that sort of stuff. Instead, it's just the practice of, like, acknowledging this is shit. This is this is hard work. This is draining. This is painful, or whatever it might be. So it's just a very short description of what is. And these are pre-prepared phrases. So if you think about a regular stressor, something that regularly sort of pushes your buttons, regularly upsets you, you can sort of think about and create a phrase as we go. So the first is just that simple description. This is. The second part is about common humanity. So when we're in a stress state, our limbic brain that needs to feel connected to feel safe goes into isolation mode. So we imagine that everyone else is doing just fine and I'm the only person that's struggling with this, or that my particular flavor of struggle is so unique that nobody would understand it, However we tend to do it, whatever our tendency is, the result is feeling alone at a time when we need to feel connected. So the common humanity part is a phrase that reminds us in that moment, that it's completely understandable that we are feeling stressed in that moment, So if to work on your example of being, working with people who are highly critical, receiving criticism is painful. It just is. It's universally painful. There's no uber human that is, absolved from this. If it's feeling lonely, loneliness is one of the hardest feelings for humans to bear, it's sort of some little phrase that in that moment reminds us that although we're all special and unique, there's nothing particularly special and unique about that, the fact that we are distressed about whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So then that's the second part of the phrase. And then the third part of the phrase is little words of kindness. So there's two ways that you can do this. If you're aware of metta meditations or loving kindness meditations, then you might be familiar with the may I feel happy, may I feel peaceful, may I feel loved, that kind of wording might feel comfortable for you. And if it does, then that's great. And so then it's thinking about, okay, in this moment, in this situation, because we're pre-planning these, so we've got the ability to think about it. What do I actually need? Like, may I remember that I'm doing the best I can with what I've got, or may I feel connected? May I feel good enough? May I remember to breathe? May I feel patient? May I remember all the times I've done a great job? May I remember I can only do the best I can, whatever it might be, whatever we need, whatever we need to remember or we need to feel in that moment, we're giving out that to ourselves, may I remember that feedback's a gift, but if that is a little bit of a stretch, when I did a course on this with Kristen Neff, and I'm not saying that to myself, like it just didn't land. So then it's
which, especially if you're dealing with an inner critic, you're going to really struggle to do this, aren't you?
Absolutely. The inner critic's like, what the hell are you going on about?
Ridiculous. Don't be stupid.
Absolutely. Thank you for acknowledging that, Amanda. Yeah, absolutely. The inner critic is not going to go, oh, okay, great. Yeah, it's going to be raging again. But what would I say to a friend, who is in this situation? You've done what you can, moving on,
Mm-hmm.
And a lovely little phrase someone shared with me recently that I've been using is shoulda, coulda, woulda, didn't, moving on.
Love it.
Lovely little one. And then, like I said, when I first started doing this stuff, it was all a bit wanky, basically, like it all a bit woo, a bit soft or whatever, but I absolutely knew wholeheartedly that the essence of it was so important, because I reckon that's what people work for years on in therapy, is how to be kinder to themselves, how to accept themselves, so you got to use where you're at, if all you do is start to, when you notice an uncomfortable feeling, just start to acknowledge it. Oh, that's a bit of sadness, or there's frustration, then that's great. That's a starting point. If you just start to sort of go, oof, that was a bit harsh. What's a nicer way to say that? Then that's a little tweak and a little adjustment. Yeah, it's definitely, it's really funny that we live in such a sort of world that there is so much resistance in us to just giving us a bit of a break, isn't it? But I think
some of us would rather work all night than take that 5-minute break for self-compassion. It'd be so much easier to just charge it and keep working, and keep going, especially to just take that moment from personal experience.
Absolutely. And especially when we're in a stress state, our systems are go, go, go. There's not enough time. We've got to get it done, blah, blah, blah. There's never going to be a voice going, oh, I think actually it'd be a great time to put your hand on your chest, take a deep breath and tell yourself you're doing a good job. But, which is why we sort of have to do it on purpose, like all new things. If it's a new thing, it'll feel a bit weird at first, but it starts to feel quite not weird, and quite addictive, and quite, supportive.
And this is interesting too, because I think, once again, personally, and from the conversations I've had, some of the modern day things we're seeing on social media, the modern phrases like just be positive, think positive, so you're having a terrible day at work and you're going, I love my job, I love my job, I love my job. But actually, you know, in your heart, you don't. So you're lying. And I remember taking a break from yachting and doing my yoga teacher training. And I had witnessed a very big accident, you know, doing CPR for a long time. I needed a break from it all. So I was running away. And they said something about being positive. And I said, you know, all the time. And I said, but what if you're not? And everyone just looked at me like the freak in the room. And I was like, but seriously, like, why would you keep saying that you're positive? And how can you be positive if you're not feeling positive? Like, and I just thought, surely I can't be the only one in a room of, you know, 50 people that's feeling this way. And for years, the inner critic in me just had a field day with that, because it was like, you should have kept your mouth shut. Now everyone thinks you're a freak. And I really love this technique you've shared, because it's giving yourself that time for honesty, rather than, I feel, making the stress state worse by saying that you're the opposite when you're not.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's done so much damage, that sort of toxic positivity sort of vibe, you know, it's just gone too far. I mean, yeah, it'd be great, wouldn't it? It'd be awesome if we were all deliriously happy all the time, but it's such an unattainable sort of goal. And such a huge part of resilience is learning how to feel into our feelings. And, you know, like, whether they are, I really try not to label feelings as positive or negative, because I think that's part of the problem. It's almost that sort of goes, oh yes, more of them. No, go away, those yucky ones, you know, but they just are how they are. And if we can sit with ourselves and acknowledge, you know, right now in this moment, I am absolutely hating this job. Hating your job when you're stuck on a yacht is really fucking hard. You know, may I remember, it'll pass and good times will come, you know, like, it's that acknowledgement that goes at least 50% of the way to regulating our emotions. It's the pushing it down and the pretending it's all fine and, oh yeah, no, everything's great. That creates so much internal distress, you know, for us. But the fear is, start acknowledging our feelings, then we'll just, you know, lie around wallowing in self-pity. But that's not what happens, because the feelings then pass, you know, they're temporary, but they need noticing and acknowledging, you know.
Well, thank you on behalf of all of yachting for suddenly giving us permission to feel our feelings. I don't think, speaking for the whole of the industry, that many of us are brave enough to do that when it's actually so simple. So it's so much easier finding a distraction and punish yourself, where it's actually easier to take a moment and be honest. So I really encourage everyone listening to talk about that. And when we go into our further trainings, I'm sure you'll give more tools and some more advice. Something I really want to ask, and please don't be offended, but sometimes I think when people hear the word clinical psychotherapist, it's quite daunting. And they're kind of expecting to be in a very clinical environment and maybe not ever allowed out, or, you know, it can sound quite scary. And it's one thing saying, oh, I'm getting some coaching, but to say, yes, I was at my clinical psychotherapist the other day. So can you just shed some light on the difference between a counsellor, a psychologist, a psychotherapist, what makes you a clinical psychotherapist, and how that all goes together, so we can just dispel the myth of you being this scary person in a grey suit, you know, hypnotizing us with a watch?
Absolutely. Great question. I remember one of my kids, when I first had a website, they're like, why are you describing yourself as Psycho the Rapist? And I was like, oh my God, it's such an unfortunate.
Oh my God, I've never noticed that.
I had never sort of read it in that way, but yes. The clinical part of the psychotherapist just goes to years on the job and, you know, levels of professional development. And I guess I sometimes use it, I sometimes don't. The psychotherapy as a field is So it's the training is different to psychology. Typically, psychology follows more of a medical model of sort of diagnosis and treatment, whereas psychotherapy sort of takes more of a holistic approach, looking at, you know, with that sort of belief that each individual person has their own answers inside. It's just a matter of the right environment and the right supports to help find the answers, you know, that there's no sort of magic homework that's going to fix it for everyone, you know. It incorporates with the body a lot. We move, go outside. It's sort of the opposite of sitting with a, you know, sort of analyzing and constructing. There are loads of psychologists that work in a very psychotherapeutic sort of manner, and there are probably psychotherapists that work more in, say, the CBT type model, you know. So there is a lot of why I chose psychotherapy at the time when I went into it, and something that I do really value about the psychotherapy training is that you have to do a whole heap of personal work. You have to therapy for 4 years as part of my training, where I was in group therapy for 4 years. You have to do, I can't remember if it's like 100 or 150, but hours of personal therapy. And I think that is a really valuable thing to have done, to be able to sit with someone else and support them through their stuff. If you've not gone through that process yourself, then I think that's, you know, really hard. And I think obviously a lot of psychologists do that off their own bat, you know, like, but it's not part of the training. So yeah, there's similarities, there's differences, there's crossovers, and really people are people and therapists are therapists, whatever the training, you know. And so it's sort of, it's getting that match that feels good and feels right.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, because it just gives it a fantastic summary of what it is and the differences. And I really like that you do point out the work required personally to be able to get there too. It's really important. So people can work with you one-on-one, plus we are working together to bring out an amazing course with Kate and Mel, which is going to be really exciting and released soon. And so I'll be putting your contact details below so people can also reach out to you individually. And I'm just so grateful. I could talk to you for hours and hours on this right now, but the exciting thing is we will. We've got so much more to share with everyone. And I'm just so grateful that you're in my life and that you've come on board. And thank you for this chat. I think it's been really well received.
Oh, thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I feel the same. It's really great. Thank you very much for your time and for your awesome questions and your sharing too.
Thank you. So yeah, everyone, just as we hang up the call, take a moment, put your hand on your heart and just take that moment to remember that you're awesome. And if you're not, then admit it. If you're not feeling awesome, don't say you're awesome. Just say, I'm not awesome right now.
Sometimes a lunatic. Yeah. And that is okay. Yes.
And now my inner critic that didn't like that is getting upset because a millennial told me the other day I really shouldn't be saying awesome. They're like, my grandmother says that. And I went, well, you're on the same age as your grandmother. So it's hilarious. I'll go and work on that in my own time, though. Thanks for the homework. We'll be thinking of you as we muddle through the days. I think it's going to be the quick toilet break that we'll be like, oh,
okay. Absolutely.
Well, you're brilliant, and super excited for more. We'll chat really soon. Thanks everyone for watching, and this is Kate Diggle. You'll find out all her information below, and you'll meet her again soon.
Thanks, Amanda.
Ciao.